What's up everyone, second video for this week. Today I'm going to show you how I'm going to go from this to that. So it's a Lightroom editing tutorial episode, whatever you want to call it. But before we start, I want to share the new Lightroom preset pack I just launched on my website. It's linked below, check it out. It's Desert Photography Lightroom preset pack. That is quite a mouthful, but it's packed with 10 Lightroom presets that are really great for desert, hot, dry, earthy, brown, summer colors. So Northern Hemisphere is getting summer right now. I'm sure it's going to get dry in your area, and if it does, check out those presets. I think they'll help you with your editing workflow. And thanks to everyone who's bought one in the past. It really helps me create these videos for you. So if you enjoy it and you want to support me, check out the Lightroom preset pack. I think you'll have fun with it and it supports me. So great way to say thanks. So enough talking, let's head over to Lightroom and I'll show you some cool techniques. So here we are. This is a photo I captured on the panorama route in South Africa. It's probably one of my favorite ones, probably all time at the moment. I really love the composition and how everything just really came together for this shot. I love the high contrast in the middle and this branch leading us into the shot, and we have all these nice lines coming in from the sides, all pulling us into the middle of this shot or into the subject of this shot. And we have a nice contrast here and this unique yellow color that really captures your eye. First things first, I think I prefer this to be a bit more of a wide angle shot. So I'm gonna do this and obviously make it a bit more symmetrical. So I'm guiding myself with these guys. And I'll probably crop out the sky just to make the whole image a little more mysterious. Let's go up a little more. There we go. I quite like it now. Okay, that's a good starting point. I'll work off that. As usual, I like a little more desaturated, so I'll usually start off by pulling my vibrance down and checking my white balance. Everything looks all right. Maybe cool it down a little bit to get that mysterious look at it. Okay. That's very green right now, so we'll definitely go. Okay, then I'll just flatten my image as I usually do. So I will pull down the highlights and pull up the shadows to create this HDR look. Don't worry, we'll fix it as quick as possible. Next thing, I'll go into the curve. So I'm really just doing this as I would normally edit an image. Here we go. I'll pull up the blacks and pull down the whites a bit. And then up here, I'll come and pull up the whites just to bring a little more contrast back in there. Obviously way too much color again, so I'm eventually gonna deal with that. And I'll probably set another dot and lift those dark shadows a little more. And just I'm happy to lose the detail down here just to create a less busy looking image. We'll need a little more contrast, yeah. And bring up that exposure just a tad. That looks good. And obviously way too much color for my flavor right now. So I'm gonna come down into the saturation. So instead of staying up here and working on all my saturation up here, I will come down here. I'll make this a little wider for you guys. I'll come down here and into my HSL hue saturation luminescence panel, which I've clicked on all, so I can drop down all of them at once. And I'm gonna pull over my saturation, definitely the main colors of my image. So we've got a lot of greens in here, gotta be careful with that one. And maybe some aqua. Yeah, the water's very got that aqua, and you can see at the top as well. So I'm just sliding left and right to see what color I'm affecting on what area of the image. So I'm just gonna bring that down, bring those greens down a little more. Is there any blue? Yeah, the water's also quite blue. Now that looks a bit weird, so we're gonna pull the blues down as well. Any purples in here? Not so much. And magenta, neither, but maybe some red. No red either. So that's more the saturation I like. Still very dark in the foreground. So maybe I'll start working with some luminescence. So let's bring some more contrast into the greens. Maybe color them up a little bit more to balance out the image a little. I'll just push up these and see what happens. As you can see, all the greens are starting to pop. Now I don't want them to pop too much. I don't want to lose my yellow subject. If I do this, I lose my subject, right? My eye just stays in the foreground. It doesn't get pulled into the shot. If I do that, obviously we're losing all the details. So gotta find that balance, pump it up a little, and maybe see what we can do with the yellows. I'm sure if I drop those a bit, yeah, it looks a bit just more contrast, so we get more, this is darker and the waterfall's brighter. The hues of the blues we're actually working before, so how about we drop those a little bit? Not too sure, maybe a little. Yeah, a little. Agua was in the top area. I'm gonna keep that. I like that misty area up here. Really constrains the whole shot and brings us to the middle, so I'm gonna keep that there. That foreground is very dark. Let's see, I think the greens are a bit too juicy green for my flavor, and I think a little too much. So what I'll do is I'll bring the greens a little bit into the yellow area, and maybe bring the yellows a little further into the orange. So I'm just affecting the yellow and green areas here by editing that area a bit. Now that rock up there is very distracting, and I'll probably go into it into like some local adjustments. But what can we see here? If I pull orange tones, which is really affecting just the jacket, the path, and the rock, mostly the rock, I can change it. None of this is really fixing it for me, so let's keep it there. What if we drop the saturation? There, the rock is starting to lose its distraction in this shot. Still, it's not working so well. It's really bringing this shot a little bit out of balance, so I'll try and darken it down a little in a local adjustment. Overall, this image is starting to look pretty nice for me. Like I said, I'm still not happy with this, how dark this is, but that's also local adjustment. We can probably pull the shadows up a little bit and the blacks a bit. Yeah, there we go. We're starting to look a little brighter, maybe a little more contrast. All right, that looks good. Drop those blues and aguas. And yeah, it's a really fine balance with the greens. This is just not enough. That is just too much, so it's somewhere in there. And usually when you see greens in a shot, it's actually like nature, it's actually more yellow than green. So what happens if we move the yellows? Yeah, the jacket obviously is affected quite a bit, and the rock a bit, but also the green, the actual greenery. So I'll keep it similar to my other green tone. Okay. Now, to bring together the whole shot a little more, I'm going to put in some split toning. So for split toning, it really helps you tie the whole image, the whole color palette together by overlaying some extra colors. So here we go. What I'll usually do is I'll bump up the saturation like crazy. We're working with the highlights, so it'll affect mostly this area, that area, and up here there. And then, so I'll bump up the saturation, and then I'll just slide this across until I get a color. I hit a color that I'm like, all right, this works. Okay, so somewhere here, that looks right. Yeah. And then I'll drop the saturation. Of course, it's way too strong at the moment, so I'll bring that. It's a really subtle effect. There you go. It just makes the water and the top area look a little more, it blends it more into the shot. There's a lot of shadow areas in this shot, so we'll try and see what we can do here. Bring up that saturation like crazy. Drive this across. I think I hit something here. I like the blue tone. I like the atmosphere in this. It's just cooling the whole image down a bit. And we'll bring down the saturation to somewhere here. So if I turn that off and turn it back on, super subtle, off, and back on again. So the difference is really small, but you'll see it does affect the whole image a little bit, which is nice. As usual, so most of this stuff I ignore for now. I'll bring up my dehaze a little bit up to 10. I don't usually go above 10, that's enough. It just adds a little more contrast and clarity into the image. And then down here, the post-crop vignetting, so the vignetting that's caused after the cropping, I want to suck the eye into the shot a little more, so let's just push that down quite a bit. Oh, it's getting dark here. This image is getting really dark and moody. Let's do this. Now what I like what it's doing is getting rid of this rock. Half of this rock is looking much better now. Maybe not so dark. Okay, that looks good. Next, I'll come back up and maybe I'll brighten up this image a little. It's very dark at this stage. Not good. If we're looking at the histogram, the whole thing's just basically shadow. So let's bring this up and here we go. We're starting to get a little more punch in the image. Let's bring those highlights down again, get more detail in the water. So it's a really back and forth, as you can see. I'm developing this image as I go. I think I'll pull down that vibrance a little more. Maybe the vibrance is fine. I think, you know, I could do this with saturation too. I think the vibrance affects the skin tones less. So anything that's orange and things like that. So maybe we should play with the saturation and see if that affects the rock more. So if I pull this down compared to, let's say this, the effect on the rock is not as strong with vibrance. So let's bring that vibrance back up and the saturation down. And then I'll go back down here to saturation. I'll play with those greens a bit. I'll definitely play with the luminescence of my oranges just to affect this area again until I've done as much as I possibly can with global adjustments. Now I'm gonna go slip into local adjustments. So we're really going into the detail now. I'm gonna go here and I really wanna punch up that path. So I'll show you by pressing T, I can get the toolbar. I'll show you the mask overlay so you can see what I'm painting. Right now I have barely any effect, so my brush is not doing anything. I'm just gonna paint in the area. I do have auto mask on, so it's gonna automatically select the darker areas for me and ignore the brighter ones. It works quite well. I think that's gonna be part of my path too. Okay, so I really want to create that leading line and just make that stand out in a way. So we'll hide this. So I'll just bring it up a little bit, but what I want to do is create a different color in there. So here we go. Look, now we've created a bit of a brown tone in there. Bring up those shadows a bit. Those highlights down, maybe a bit of contrast. There we go. Now that path is really sucking us into where the person's standing. I might remove a little bit by pressing Alt or Option, and I can just zoom in and out, like scroll up and down to change the size, and then I'll get rid of that. I don't mind. That doesn't have to change. I'm pretty happy with what that's like now. I'll just press Enter to confirm it, and then we'll start drawing a new one. Actually, the tree is fine. I like the darkness of the tree. Maybe the rocks we can work on a little bit. So I'm just going to brush. I'll show you. So we've brushed in these rocks in the front here. All right, hide that. Let's bring up that exposure a little bit. If I drop the contrast, it basically blends them more into the shot, but it brightens them up at the same time. So bring the shadows up a bit. So happy with that. Let's move on to the top area. Well, let's move on to this area. This is what's most distracting. So I'm going to go to to the radial adjustment tool, radial filter, Shift M. Good to learn all these shortcuts. And I'll start in the middle and click and drag. And here we go. Okay, that's good. That's mostly that area. If I hover over it, I can see my mask. So I got a very soft edge to it, which is the feather. So it's on 50%, that's good. So the adjustment is very subtle towards the edges. And then I'm just gonna, so the saturation was down already a little bit. I'm gonna drop that even more and maybe just change the temperature to blend that in a little more. I'm gonna just make it more green. See what happens. Okay, that's still fine. I'm gonna have to go down a little more. Come here. Yep. That contrast. How about bringing the exposure down a little? Now that's blending in a little more for me. Okay, it's a subtle change. Okay, so that's looking good. I like how that's no longer distracting in the shot. It's actually blending in a lot more. And now up here, I like this. I like the mist up here. Why not, enhance it? And why not add to the atmosphere? So what I could do is either do a massive radial filter and just use the bottom third of my circle, or I could do a graduated one. So I'll pull in with that, or the same as pressing M on your keyboard, and I'll do a really big one. So what this does is anything from where I started, this line here is 100%, this is 50%, and that is 0%. So if I go here, leave my mouse on the dot, you can see, so it'll start at 100% and then gradually between these two lines move from 100 to 0. So when I bring these closer, then the gradient gets much more defined. So I'll drag this out a long way, and knowing that this area is barely going to be affected, but the transition will be really smooth. So First thing I'll do is just change the white balance, see what happens. We can do this, or we can go cold. Now cold starts to separate the image a little bit too much, so I'll go warm. Maybe I can go a bit more magenta, or maybe... Now this is over the top, but why not do this and pull the saturation down a bit? And I think now with Lightroom CC you can do dehaze as well. I can dehaze that area a little and bring that exposure down a bit. Contrast up a bit. Maybe the shadows fix that a little bit in the front area here. I like how we're creating different tones from here to there to here. It just creates a little more variation in the greens. Maybe I'll warm it up a little so it doesn't stand out too much. And there we go. I think this is looking pretty good. I'm quite happy. Exposure wise, yes, it's a very dark shot. It's a very moody shot, but that's exactly what I wanted to have here. I kind of like what we've got here. What I could do now is maybe with the brush adjustment tool, I can come in and fix the water as well. So I'll show you the mask again. Come in and fix all this. And what I'll do is just increase the clarity to just get more definition. Maybe drop the highlights just a little to show more definition. I think that looks good. Maybe the whites. Gotta be careful here. There we go. What I could do is bring my yellow jacket model out a little bit. So I'll just create a bit more of a focal point by just creating another circle here in the middle. Very subtly bringing up my whites a little, highlights a little bit, and create that contrast. Maybe, okay, the colors have gone a little bit crazy, so I'm gonna drop it a couple of points there. And there we have it. The model stands out a lot more. The yellow jacket model. There we go. Maybe a little more local contrast, which I can do by adding clarity, but as always, be super careful with clarity because you can wreck your shot doing this. So I'll never go above 10% if I even add clarity. So I'm very, very careful with clarity. And maybe those black tones, bring those down a bit. So I'm just doing super fine local adjustments to finish off the shot. There, it's gone a bit too far, but definitely pushed. So by pulling down my blacks, which is a lot of my shadows, which is the biggest part of my image, I can affect a lot of the image. By pulling them down, I'm just basically crushing all those blacks and creating more contrast in the shadows, which obviously makes the highlights pop more because the shadows have become darker. But for the rest, I'm very happy with this right now. Let's see if we can bring those green tones a little more. I think that looks pretty good. Personal taste, right? I'm happy with this right now. Maybe drop that saturation a little extra. All right, that's it for this edit. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope I see you again next episode. If you liked it, please subscribe, turn on the notifications so you actually get a notification when there's a new video. And if you want to support me, check out the Lightroom preset pack for desert photography and plenty other packs as well. They're all linked below in the description. I hope you can make use of these presets. I hope you learned something. Let me know in the comments below. And hopefully I'll see you next week again.